I am 79 years old. My heart stopped for 11 minutes on an October morning in Nashville, Tennessee. 11 minutes. The paramedics wrote it in their report, and my cardiologist read it to me 3 days later in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and the quiet grief of my daughter sitting in the corner. I tell you that number not to impress you, but because numbers are the language of the world you still live in, and I want you to understand the weight of what I am about to say. I know what waits on the other side of your last breath. I have stood inside it, and what I found there rearranged everything I thought I knew about God, about death, and about the Father I had not spoken to in 4 years before the Lord took him home in 2003. I carried that unfinished silence like a stone in my chest for 20 years. I want to tell you what happened to that stone. If you are carrying something unfinished today, something you have been too proud or too frightened or too tired to resolve, then please stay with me through this whole story. When it is done, I believe you will understand why I came back. And if this touches something deep in your heart, leave a word in the comments below. Just your name, or just the words, "I am here." Because I believe God uses ordinary voices to carry extraordinary grace. And I think he may have placed you here today for a reason neither of us fully understands yet. My name does not matter to this story. What matters is that I was born in 1946, the second daughter of a man who built things with his hands and kept his feelings locked somewhere I was never given a key to. We grew up outside of Knoxville, Tennessee. My father was a farmer and a part-time carpenter, the kind of man who could frame a wall or fix an engine, but who sat at the dinner table in a silence so practiced it had become a form of language all its own. He was not cruel. I want to say that clearly, because cruelty would have been easier to understand. What he gave us instead was a careful distance, a love that expressed itself only in provisions, the roof over our heads, the food on the table, the shoes purchased a size too large so we would not outgrow them too fast. I learned to read his love in those shoes. I just never learned to tell him I had. We moved to Nashville in 1968 when I married Raymond. Raymond was a good man, a deacon at First Baptist Church on Charlotte Avenue, and for 51 years that church was the architecture of my spiritual life. I knew my Bible. I could quote Psalm 91 and Romans 8 without hesitation. I volunteered for the grief ministry, the Christmas kitchen, and the summer vacation Bible school. I prayed before meals and before bed, and when Raymond died in 2017, I prayed through the kind of grief that hollows you out and refills you with something quieter and more serious than the faith you had before. But I confess to you now, honestly, that even with all of that, even with 50 years of Sunday mornings and Wednesday nights, my faith had become something I wore rather than something I lived inside, a coat rather than a skin. I believed in Christ the way you believe in the existence of the ocean when you have never actually stood on the shore, and felt the water move beneath your feet. My father died in February of 2003. We had not spoken in 4 years. The reason was pride, mine mostly. He said something at my daughter's wedding in 1999 that opened an old wound so precisely it felt like intention, though I know now it was only his particular damage expressing itself the only way it knew how. I told myself I would call when I was ready. I was not ready in 1999 or 2000 or 2001 or 2002. And then it was February 2003, and my sister was calling from Knoxville, and the time for being ready had passed. I carried that unfinished conversation for 20 years. I had 2 pastors counsel me through it. I wrote him letters I never sent. Some griefs are not resolved by processing them. They require something outside of ourselves to dissolve them. I did not know that until the morning my heart stopped. By the fall of 2024, I was not well. Congestive heart failure had been with me for 2 years, managed with 4 medications and a life that had contracted down to the essential. I slept in a recliner because lying flat brought the fluid up into my lungs. My oxygen concentrator hummed beside me all night like a faithful mechanical prayer. I had stopped driving. The world I once moved through freely had folded itself into a few rooms. On the morning of October 17th, I woke before dawn. The light outside was that pale silver gray of an early Tennessee autumn, the kind of light that makes everything look like a memory, even as it is happening. I had my Bible open on my lap, open to Isaiah 43. I had read those words perhaps 1,000 times. That morning I was not reading them. I was looking at them the way you look at a word you have said so many times it has stopped holding meaning. And I was cold, not the ordinary cold of an early morning, but something deeper, a cold that seemed to originate inside the bones themselves. I thought about my father, his large, capable hands that had built a barn and repaired a truck engine and never once reached for mine. And I said aloud to the empty room, "I am sorry, Daddy. I should have called." The words fell into the silence and dissolved, and then the room tilted, and then everything stopped. They told me afterward what happened from the outside. My neighbor Shirley came by and found me slumped in the recliner and called 911. The paramedics worked 11 minutes before my heart restarted. From the outside, that is the story. From the inside, the story is entirely different. The first thing that left was the pain. Not gradually, all at once, like a sound that has been so constant you stopped hearing it until the moment it disappears. The relief was so complete it almost had a sound of its own, a kind of deep interior quiet I had not experienced in years. And then came something I cannot describe accurately in any language I have. There was light, but calling it light the way we call a lamp light is like calling the ocean water. It is accurate and entirely insufficient. This light was not illuminating, it was communicating. It had intention. It knew me. Not the me that lived in Nashville and wore sensible shoes and folded her grief into journals. The me underneath all of that. The original me. The self that existed before any of the damage or the distance or the carefully maintained silences. That self was recognized, and the recognition felt like being called home from a very long journey you had forgotten you were on. I was moving through a space that had no ceiling, no boundary, no distance in the usual sense. The air carried a warmth that was not temperature. It was relational warmth, the warmth of absolute welcome. And there was a sound, not music in any conventional sense, but something closer to the feeling music produces in your chest when it speaks precisely to what you are. Something vast and deep and unhurried, as though the whole of creation was breathing in a rhythm that required nothing of you except that you be present within it. I was not afraid. I want to dwell on this because I think it will mean something to you if you have spent any portion of your life managing fear the way I had. I am a woman who was afraid of things, afraid of the silence that lived in my father's house and later lived in my own chest. In that place, all of it was simply absent, not overcome or suppressed, absent, as if it had been carefully removed, the way a surgeon removes something that was never supposed to be there. And the space where it was is clean and full of light. And then he was present. I will not say I saw him the way you see a person across a room, because that framing is too small for what occurred. I was aware of him the way you are aware of the sun, not by looking directly at it, but by the way everything in its presence is fully revealed. He did not speak in English or in any language that requires a tongue or an ear. He spoke the way music speaks, through felt meaning, bypassing the architecture of words. And the first thing I understood, not heard but understood, was that he knew my whole story. Every year of it, every silence, and every small courage, and every prayer I had half believed, and every letter I had written to my dead father and never sent. He knew it all, and the knowing was not judgment. It was the purest form of love I have ever experienced. To be fully known and fully loved at the same moment, without exception, without the withholding that human love is always complicated by. That is what I am trying and failing to describe to you. I saw my life not as a sequential review, but as a simultaneous presence of all that I had been and done, every moment available all at once, held in the light of that knowing. I saw the morning Raymond proposed to me at the kitchen table, with a ring wrapped in a paper towel, because he had forgotten a box, and I had laughed so hard I spilled my coffee. I saw the night my youngest daughter had a fever of 104, and I sat on the bathroom floor praying, and felt, for one of the only times in my life, that my prayer was arriving somewhere true. I saw the years of faithful service at First Baptist, and I understood that those acts had been real and received even when they felt routine. I saw the silence between my father and me, from a depth I had never been able to reach while living inside it. I saw his own childhood, the wounds he had inherited from his own silent father, the chain of unexpressed love passed down through generations like a difficult inheritance that each person tried and failed to spend before they died. I saw that he had loved me, not the way I needed to be loved, not in the language I needed it in, but in the only language available to him, and I understood that this was enough to release. Then I was aware of him, my father. He was not old and diminished the way I last saw him. He was perhaps 40, the age I associate with his fullest self. He was at a distance, but it was not the distance of separation. It was the distance of a man who had been waiting patiently, the way people wait at train stations for arrivals they are entirely certain of. I understood that he had been holding space for this, that the conversation I had postponed for 4 years and mourned for 20 had not ended. What passed between us did not require words. It moved through something faster and truer than language. I released what I had carried. He received it. He released what he had needed to give, and I received it. The word for this in the language of that place was not forgiveness. That word is too small and too transactional. The word was something closer to restored, a restoration of something that was supposed to have been there all along, now finally in its right place. And Christ was present in the center of that restoration, not as a mediator managing a transaction, but as the very substance of it, the light through which everything I had been unable to give my Father, and everything he had been unable to give me, was finally made sufficient and complete. The stone was gone. 20 years of carried weight, lifted in a moment that was outside of time, and there was only grace. The return was abrupt and painful. One moment I was in that vast, luminous, complete place. The next I was gasping, actually gasping, with the specific wrongness of being reinserted into a body that hurt, in a room lit with brutal fluorescent light, with someone pressing on my chest and someone else saying my name very loudly. My daughter was there, in the corner of that hospital bay, holding herself with both arms, the way people do when they are trying not to come apart in a public place. When she saw my eyes open, she made a sound I will carry for whatever time I have left. Not a word, just the involuntary exhale of a fear that has been present so long it had become part of breathing and was now suddenly released. I reached for her hand. I spent 3 days in that hospital. The first day I slept, not from exhaustion, but from the particular grief of re-entry, the profound loss of having been somewhere that complete, and having to readjust to the density and noise of a physical world. Colors seemed muted in a way that made me understand, for the first time, that what we call color in this world is something closer to shadow compared to what I had seen. The second day I cried quietly into my hospital pillow, not from sorrow, but from a gratitude so large it overflowed through the eyes, because there was nowhere else for it to go. The third day I asked for my Bible. It opened to Isaiah 43. I called you by name, you are mine. This time I read it and wept again, because I knew with a certainty that was no longer faith but knowledge what those words actually meant. I am home in Nashville now, in my recliner, with my oxygen concentrator humming its faithful prayer beside me. I still have congestive heart failure. My body has not been dramatically healed in the way that makes for clean testimonies, but something that could not be seen on any scan has been completely healed, and it is the most important thing that was ever broken in me. I move through my days now with an attention I did not have before. I notice the particular quality of light at 4 in the afternoon through my living room window. I notice the weight of my coffee cup in the morning. I notice small kindnesses with the attention I once reserved only for large things. I am not afraid to die. I say that slowly because I want you to receive it in its full meaning, not as resignation or spiritual bravado, but as something earned by 11 minutes of first-hand knowledge that 50 years of Sunday attendance could not have produced in me. I am not afraid to die because I have been to the other side of that threshold, and the one who stands there knows your name the same way he knew mine, fully, tenderly, without exception, without condition. If you are carrying something unfinished today, a person you cannot forgive, a faith you have been wearing like a coat instead of living inside of it, I want to tell you that the grace I found at that border is not reserved for the dying. It is available to you in this moment, wherever you are, as you listen to an old woman tell you what she learned by coming close enough to death to finally see clearly. Reach toward it. The hand has always been there, extended, patient, and certain. We are simply the ones who keep not reaching. I came back to tell you to reach.